Hello, this is a short video on business research approaches. It usually comes at the beginning of a research methods course that we start coming across particularly difficult words like epistemology and ontology, subjectivism, positivism, and all these things. They're very long words and they're not really very simple ideas, but they are ideas that it's worth exploring. So that's what this short video is going to try and do. If we think about the research process, then all we're trying to do is think of something interesting to find out about that world. But there are already assumptions in that statement by Remeni. Actually, how do we see the world? And, what kind of thoughts do we want to investigate? Can we collect evidence? How do we collect evidence? Is the evidence the same for you and me if we look at the same thing? I'm probably starting to get a bit obscure, but always remember that we don't start ever from a blank sheet. When we're starting to research something, we bring a lot of ideas and perspectives from our own experience. Now, here's one way of thinking about it. Way back in '94, researchers talked about two modes of knowledge. Mode 1 was created by academics, by academic inquiry for an intellectual purpose, just to know more about the world. And I suppose we'd call it basic research, something that never finds enough funding because its sister, Mode 2, applied research, is apparently more practical, has a more immediate need. And so that's what we tend to see more of and what we find more interesting and what funders, including governments, find more interesting to fund. But without the basic research, we wouldn't have discovered DNA and we wouldn't know anything about genetic modification or indeed about the treatment of genetic disease. So basic research mode 1 is quite important, and not just in medicine. In business too. There are things we need to find out. Right now, it's, as always, very difficult to work out what's happening with the global economy. There are many, many different points of view. The more research we do to see how the different factors in a business economy interrelate and how it produces different patterns at different times. This is basic research which is going to help us understand how to operate things like interest rates. So, mode 1 and mode 2. But there's also a mode 3, and that was discussed by Huff and Huff in the beginning of this century, and that's neither straight basic research nor applied or practical research, but research which is produced because society needs it. It's the bigger picture stuff. It's things to do with how we frame social policy, how we frame business policy for that matter. So there are some different ways of thinking about knowledge. But while we're thinking about knowledge, we're going to trip over the word epistemology. It's really about what kind of knowledge is acceptable in your field of study. And your understanding of this is going to affect your approach to research. Now, we can take a positivist position on knowledge, which says that reality is represented by objects which are real. I've put real in inverted commas because it's a point of view, but this is saying that there's something out there that we can observe and test, and that the knowledge we get from that test can be value-free. It's not affected by my beliefs or my views. A lot of scientific observation and testing is based on this positivist position, so it's a really important one. But it's not the only one. The interpretivist position on knowledge is that really everything that appears real is only appearing real and is affected by the person observing it. It doesn't really exist outside us because it's something that we construct, we make sense of. And because we are complicated people who have different values and beliefs about the world, that means that knowledge is always value-laden. There are different ways to interpret it, hence interpretivist. So the discovery of feelings or interpretations of the same thing, the same phenomenon, by different people would fall into this category. Just think about it. When you have several people watching a road traffic accident, you have different versions of that reality. So what then is ontology? Well, another long word really, but it's not too far away from our discussion of epistemology. While epistemology focuses on the nature of knowledge, ontology looks deeper at the way we understand the world and the things in it. So instead of just looking at whether a scientific or positivist approach to testing hypotheses and observing reality is relevant for our research study, ontology asks us to identify the assumptions we have about the world that we're researching. An objectivist view is that social entities, like a business company or an organisation, has an existence in reality quite irrespective of the people in that company or the people talking about that company or buying from that company. Whereas a subjectivist view is that social entities like companies exist through the perceptions and the actions of the people who inhabit them. So in other words, the staff, the customers, the managers, they are making a construction of the company. It doesn't have a separate reality. Well, if you're lost, you can go back and repeat this video, and I'm sure you can find much more in the literature. Go to a good research methods book. You can download a free research methods book from www.bookboon.com, or you can look in your library at one of the many really good research methods textbooks out there. Textbooks like Sanders, Lewis and Thornhill, Bryman and Bell, these are all authors who have wonderful textbooks and can explain exactly these terms in more detail and with more examples. But let's just conclude this video by saying that business research is usually messy, and it doesn't usually fall very neatly into one research approach or another. You might want to do a bit of positivist research. You might have a hypothesis to test that you feel is testable, but you might also want to explore people's attitudes to that thing that you're testing and take a more interpretivist stance. In the end, we'll probably end up with a realist or a pragmatist view, which is going to perhaps involve both some quantitative positivist data and some interpretivist approaches. Business research is definitely messy, but by trying to understand these perspectives of epistemology and ontology, we can clarify our own approaches and try to make explicit when we present our research the assumptions that we bring to that research. We may find that our research question is largely something that's testable, in which case we'll probably use a positivist approach, and we will probably develop hypotheses and use deduction to argue logically as to whether our hypotheses are proven or not. Or we might find that our research question is much more suitable for an interpretivist approach, and that there's no suitable theory to test, so we use an inductive approach to our research. We construct theory through our research instead of testing it. So a few ideas about business research.